You're about to marry your sister's fiancé. In a coma." Lily stood at the altar trembling. The man she was supposed to marry wasn't even awake, but here she was, trapped in a web of family secrets and lies. As the church bells rang, the reality hit. This wasn't just a marriage. It was a contract. Her family made sure of that. Suddenly, the sound of a phone buzzing breaking the silence. But just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, she received a message from him, from the man in the coma, and it changed everything. Subscribe now to follow the shocking twists in this story. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let me know. Lily Anderson had always been the quiet one in her family. She lived in the shadows of her older sister Julia, beautiful, outgoing, and the darling of the Anderson family. Growing up in the heart of Denver, Colorado, with their family's wealth and status, everything was a competition, and Julia always seemed to win. But tonight, everything was about to change. Lily sat in her father's study, the weight of his gaze heavy upon her. Her mother, Evelyn, stood by the window, watching the night fall. The house felt colder than usual, the ticking of the clock louder. Lily's heart raced. She couldn't believe what her father was asking her to do. "Lily," Richard Anderson's voice cut through the silence. "You'll marry him. It's the only way to keep this from falling apart." Her father's words hit her like a slap, his eyes cold with determination. Grant Blackwood, her sister's fiancé, lay in a coma after a tragic car accident. He was unconscious, with no guarantee of ever waking up. But to her father, that didn't matter. What mattered was the marriage contract that had been set in motion months ago, long before the accident. The Blackwood family was wealthy, powerful, and influential in ways that could benefit the Andersons. A union with them wasn't just about love. It was about securing the family's future. "You can't be serious," Lily whispered, the room spinning around her. "I can't marry him. Julia will never forgive me." Her mother's voice broke in, sharp and insistent. "She doesn't need to know. It's the only way, Lily. You're the only one who can save us." Lily's mind raced. She couldn't understand how her father could ask her to betray her own sister, to marry the man she was supposed to love. But then the unspoken truth hit her. This wasn't about her feelings. This was about the family, their legacy, and the empire her father had worked so hard to build. "Lily, you're the only one who can do this," her father continued, his voice softening, but the edge of authority still present. "If you don't, everything we've worked for will be lost." Her gaze fell to the contract resting on the desk between them, the papers sealed with promises and signatures that bound her to something she wasn't sure she could live with. And yet, she knew she had no choice. With trembling hands, she reached for the pen. Lily's fingers hovered over the pen, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She glanced at her father, then at her mother, both waiting for her to act. The silence in the room was suffocating. In that moment, everything felt wrong. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it wasn't about her. It never had been. It was about the family, their wealth, their future. With a shaky breath, she signed the contract. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper felt final, sealing her fate. She couldn't look at her father's face, couldn't bear to see the satisfaction in his eyes. But as she signed, she knew there was no turning back. The deal had been made. The room felt even colder now. Her mother stepped forward, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Good. This will set everything right." Lily's heart sank as she set the pen down. The weight of the decision was heavy on her chest, but a voice in her head kept telling her that this was just the way things were. There was no place for weakness in this family, no place for dreams. "Is that all?" Lily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Her father nodded, standing tall. "Tomorrow, you'll marry him. The wedding is set. You'll meet with the Blackwoods tomorrow, and everything will proceed as planned." Lily felt her stomach tighten. The reality was sinking in. She was going to marry Grant, a man she barely knew, and she was doing it for the sake of her family. She could hardly imagine it, standing at the altar, her sister's face in the crowd, and Grant lying unconscious in a hospital bed. The whole situation felt like a cruel joke. "But what about Julia?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother's face tightened. "Julia will never know. We'll tell her after the marriage is official. She'll understand eventually. This is for the good of the family." Lily nodded, though her heart was heavy with guilt. She had always thought she knew her place in this family, but now she felt more like a pawn than a daughter. A pawn in a game she hadn't asked to play. As she left the study, the weight of her decision stayed with her, following her down the hall. She passed Julia's room. Her sister's door was closed, and the faint sound of music played from inside. Lily stopped for a moment, wondering if Julia would ever understand. She couldn't shake the thought of Grant, lying in that sterile hospital room, unconscious, his fate unknown. Was it possible to fall in love with someone who wasn't even awake? Could she find some part of herself in this twisted marriage? She didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain: her life was no longer her own. As Lily lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, she heard a faint buzzing sound coming from her phone. She reached for it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. "I'm awake, and I remember everything." Lily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the message on her phone. The words, simple but chilling, rattled her mind. "I'm awake, and I remember everything." Her fingers shook as she read the message again, wondering if it was some cruel joke or a mistake. But the number was unmistakable. Grant's number. He had been in a coma for weeks, his condition dire, and yet this message suggested something impossible. Her heart hammered in her chest as confusion and panic washed over her. She couldn't understand how he could be awake, let alone remember anything. She had been told, by the doctors, by her family, that he might never wake up. And now this? "What does this mean?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the room. The message offered no explanation, just a cryptic promise. "We need to talk. You're not alone in this." Lily stared at the screen, her thoughts racing. The quiet buzz of the phone was the only sound in the room. Her mind spun in every direction. Was Grant somehow aware of the situation even in his coma? Had he been playing some part in this twisted arrangement all along? Lily pressed her hand to her forehead, trying to steady herself. This was too much. Her family had already decided her fate, and now it seemed like Grant was stepping into the picture with his own agenda. She felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of everything that was happening around her. What if everything was a lie? What if her family had been hiding something about Grant's condition? But before she could dive deeper into those questions, her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. This time the message came from her father. "Meet me at the mansion tomorrow morning. We need to discuss the next steps." Lily stared at the screen, her heart sinking. Was there more to this than she realized? She stood up, pacing the room, feeling a sense of unease creep through her. There were too many unanswered questions, too many pieces to this puzzle she couldn't see. And now Grant, the man she was about to marry, was awake, and he remembered everything. What had he been told? Did he know about the forced marriage? Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow everything would change. As Lily sank into her chair, trying to calm her racing mind, she heard a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find a letter resting on the floor. No return address, no name. Just an envelope. Inside, the note read, "I know what you did, and I'm coming for you." Lily's pulse spiked, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a chill run down her spine. What had she gotten herself into? Lily's hand trembled as she held the letter, the words sinking into her mind with a heaviness that made her stomach churn. The cryptic message was clear. "I know what you did, and I'm coming for you." The letter was unsigned, but the threat it carried was unmistakable. For a moment she stood frozen at her door, the letter in her hand, her mind racing. Who would send something like this? And what exactly did they know? The implications of those few words twisted her insides into knots. She had always known that her family's world was full of secrets, but this felt different. This felt personal. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting someone to be lurking in the shadows of her room. But the silence was deafening. No one was there. The house, with its cold marble floors and towering walls, seemed emptier than ever. She crumpled the letter in her hand, tossing it aside, but the words stayed with her. She couldn't ignore the growing sense of danger that clung to her like a heavy fog. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Grant. "I need to see you. I'll be at the mansion by morning." Lily's heart skipped a beat. How was he able to get to the mansion so quickly? Was he lying? Was it possible that he wasn't as innocent in all of this as she thought? The questions seemed endless, and the uncertainty of it all was driving her mad. She thought about calling her father, asking him what was going on, why Grant had sent that message, but deep down she knew it wouldn't help. Her father was part of this game, a game she had been dragged into without her consent. With a deep breath, Lily sat down at her desk, staring out the window at the dark sky. The clock ticked relentlessly, reminding her that time was running out. Tomorrow, everything would come to a head. She could feel it in her bones. Grant, the mysterious fiancé, was awake, and with him came more than just a wedding contract. There were truths that had been buried beneath layers of lies, and now they were all coming to the surface. Suddenly, the quiet of the house was shattered by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Someone was coming. Her heart raced, but she didn't move. She waited. The door creaked open, and in walked Julia. Her older sister's face was pale, eyes wide with shock. "Lily, we need to talk," Julia said, her voice trembling. "I know what you've done. I know what's been happening behind my back." Lily's chest tightened. She had been dreading this moment, but now it was here. The secrets, the lies, they were all coming to light. "Julia, Lily began, but she couldn't find the right words. She wanted to explain, to tell her sister everything, but there was too much to untangle. Julia stepped closer, her eyes burning with a mix of betrayal and anger. "Don't try to deny it. I know about the contract, Lily. I know about Grant, and I know what you're planning to do. You're going to marry him, aren't you?" Lily felt her breath catch in her throat. The weight of her sister's gaze made her feel smaller than ever. She had never wanted to hurt Julia, but now it seemed like there was no escaping the fallout. "Please, Julia," Lily whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I didn't have a choice." Julia's face hardened, but there was a flicker of pain in her eyes. "You always had a choice, Lily. You just chose to side with them. To betray me." The words struck Lily like a slap, leaving her speechless. How could she explain that she hadn't wanted this, that she was trapped in a situation she never asked for? Julia turned away, shaking her head. "I'm not the one who's betrayed. You'll have to live with this, Lily. You'll have to live with the man you're marrying, and the consequences that follow." With those words, Julia stormed out of the room, leaving Lily standing there, feeling more alone than ever. As Lily sat in the silence, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message from Grant. It was a news alert from the local Denver channel. Breaking news: Grant Blackwood, billionaire tech mogul, found alive and conscious after a month-long coma. Family members are expected to speak at a press conference tomorrow afternoon. Lily's heart raced. Tomorrow. The world would soon know the truth. But what truth would Grant reveal? Lily stared at the news alert on her phone, the words blurring before her eyes. The reality of what this meant hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. Grant Blackwood, alive, and now the entire world would soon know. The press conference tomorrow would be a public spectacle, an event that would expose everything. The weight of it all was suffocating. She dropped the phone onto the desk and buried her face in her hands. What now? She thought. What was Grant going to say? She had been thrust into this twisted situation, marrying a man in a coma, bound by her family's manipulations, all for the sake of securing their future. But now, with Grant awake and the truth on the verge of being exposed, everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. She heard a knock on the door, followed by the sound of it creaking open. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. Julia. She hadn't left, had she? "Can we talk?" Julia's voice was softer now, more measured, but there was still an edge to it, a pain that hadn't gone away. Lily sighed, looking up. "I don't think there's much left to say, Julia." But her sister stepped into the room, closing the door behind her, and sat down beside her. There was a heavy silence before Julia spoke again, her tone quieter, more vulnerable. "You don't understand, do you?" Julia asked. "What this all means, not just for me or you, but for us, for the whole family." Lily felt her chest tighten. "I didn't want any of this, Julia. You know that, don't you?" Julia's eyes softened for a moment. "I do, but you made a choice when you signed that contract. You chose this life, this future. You're going to marry Grant. And in doing that, you're going to change everything, whether you want to or not." Lily shook her head, unable to process the flood of emotions rushing through her. "I never had a choice. You know that." Julia was silent for a long moment. Then her voice cracked. "What if Grant doesn't want this? What if he wakes up and refuses everything that's been planned for him?" The question hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. What would happen if Grant, once awake, didn't go along with the family's plans? What if he remembered everything? Everything Lily had been told, everything they had manipulated him into? Lily felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She hadn't allowed herself to consider that. If Grant rejected the contract, everything would fall apart. The Blackwoods would turn on the Andersons, and her family's fragile empire would crumble. Suddenly her phone buzzed again, breaking the tension. This time it wasn't the news or a message from Julia. It was from Grant. "I need to see you. Tonight." Lily's pulse quickened. He was awake and he wanted to meet with her. She had no idea what he was going to say, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life, her family, and her future were about to be forever altered. Lily stood up, trembling, staring at the phone screen. Her sister's words echoed in her mind. What if Grant doesn't want this? The door to her room creaked again. This time it wasn't Julia, it was her father. "Lily," he said quietly, stepping into the room with an unreadable expression on his face. "It's time to meet with Grant. We need to fix this, before it gets out of hand." Lily felt the ground shift beneath her. Whatever was coming next, it was happening faster than she could prepare for. Lily's heart raced as she looked at her father, standing in the doorway with that calm, authoritative look on his face. The same look he always had when things were about to get complicated. But this time, it felt different. He wasn't the one in control. Not anymore. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking. "Grant's awake. He's been awake for hours. He sent me a message." Richard's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He stepped further into the room and shut the door behind him, a signal that this conversation was about to get serious. "Grant is aware of what's happening," Lily continued, her voice rising with each word. "He's been conscious, and I don't know what he's planning, but he's not going to just go along with this. He's not the man you think he is." Her father took a deep breath, as if her words didn't faze him. "He will comply. We have leverage, Lily. We always do." Lily shook her head, the frustration bubbling to the surface. "Leverage? This isn't a business deal, Dad. This is my life, my future, and it's not just about money anymore. If Grant doesn't agree to this marriage, if he refuses, everything will fall apart." Richard's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You're being naive. Everything we've done, everything we've worked for. Grant will understand. He'll comply. This is about more than just you and your sister. It's about the future of this family." Lily clenched her fists, trying to steady her breathing. She felt the weight of her father's words, but deep down she knew that the man he was describing, the obedient fiancé, wasn't Grant. She could feel it in her bones. Grant was waking up, and whatever game her father had been playing was about to be exposed. "Then why did he text me, Dad?" Lily demanded, her voice sharp now. "Why is he saying he remembers everything? Why does he want to meet with me tonight?" Her father didn't answer immediately, and when he did, it wasn't the reassuring response she had hoped for. "Grant is trying to test you," Richard said, his voice measured. "He's playing the victim. Don't let him manipulate you, Lily. He may be awake, but he's still under our control." Lily wanted to scream, but she held it in. She looked at her father, this man she had grown up respecting, admiring, and saw only a stranger. Someone willing to sacrifice anything, and anyone, for the sake of his own power. Even if it meant destroying her sister's life. Even if it meant destroying her own. "You don't understand," Lily whispered. "I don't want to be a pawn in your game anymore." Her father stepped closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous tone. "You don't have a choice, Lily. You'll go to the mansion tonight, you'll meet with Grant, and you'll fix this. We're not losing everything over your misplaced sense of morality." Lily stood there, staring at her father, a sudden realization crashing over her. This wasn't just about the wedding, it was about her freedom, her choices, her life, and it was slipping away. Lily turned toward the door, determined to go and face Grant on her own terms. But just as she reached for the handle, her father's voice called out to her one last time. "I'll be watching, Lily. Don't disappoint me." With that, the door slammed shut behind her, and Lily was left alone in the hallway, feeling the walls closing in. The mansion awaited her, and Grant, and she had no idea what awaited her there. But one thing was certain, the game was changing, and Lily would never be the same again. As she stepped into the night, the words from the mysterious letter echoed in her mind. "I know what you did, and I'm coming for you." She wasn't sure who was threatening her, or if it was just another part of her family's twisted plot, but something told her that by the end of the night, everything would be exposed. Lily's footsteps echoed through the empty halls as she made her way down to the grand entrance. The mansion, so familiar yet so foreign to her now, loomed ahead. Every marble column and gilded frame seemed to mock her, a stark reminder of everything she had sacrificed for this life. Her breath caught in her throat as she pulled open the massive front door, the cool night air greeting her with the promise of uncertainty. She wasn't sure what she was walking into. The mansion was still, the lights dim, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. She had barely stepped outside when she heard the low hum of a car engine pulling up the long driveway. Her heart raced. It's him, Grant. The car came to a stop, and Lily's pulse quickened. The door opened slowly, and out stepped a figure she hadn't seen in weeks. Grant Blackwood. He looked different now. There was a strength to his presence that hadn't been there before. His hair was a bit longer than she remembered, and his face seemed more defined, the faint hint of stubble giving him a rugged edge. But it was his eyes that caught her, those intense, dark eyes, full of something she couldn't quite place. He didn't move at first, just stood there, watching her from the shadows. For a moment it felt like time had stopped, like everything that had happened up until now led to this moment. Lily's voice cracked as she stepped forward. "Grant!" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Lily." She took a tentative step toward him, her heart thudding in her chest. "You're awake," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "You're really awake." Grant nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm awake, and I know everything." Lily's breath hitched in her chest. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air between them. "What do you mean, everything?" Grant took a deep breath, stepping closer. I remember the accident, but more than that, I remember what happened before. I know what's been going on, Lily. I know about the contract." The ground beneath her seemed to shift. Her hands trembled, and her mouth went dry. "How? How could you possibly know about the contract? You were in a coma. How could you—" "I didn't wake up in a vacuum, Lily," he interrupted, his voice steady. "I've been awake long enough to hear whispers. I know what you've been told, what your family expects. I'm not a puppet in their game, and I'm not just some guy you're marrying because your father said so." Lily's head spun. "What does he mean by that?" Grant's expression softened, his eyes flickering with a mixture of pain and resolve. "This is not your fault, but we need to fix this, Lily. Together." Lily took a step back, her mind reeling. "Fix what? This whole thing, this marriage. It's all been a lie, Grant. My family, your family, everyone is playing games with our lives. They've forced me into this, into you, into us." Grant stepped closer, his hand almost reaching for hers, but he stopped just short, as if sensing her resistance. "I know, and I'm sorry, but the truth is, we have the power to change this. We can change this, Lily." Lily's heart ached. There was something in his eyes, an honesty, a vulnerability that shook her to her core. Could she trust him? Was this really him, or was it just another manipulation? She thought about her family, her father's cold assurances, and the mysterious threat she'd received earlier. Was it all tied together? Was Grant here to help, or was he another pawn in her family's twisted game? The silence stretched between them, heavy and unspoken. Finally, Lily spoke, her voice low, fragile. "How do we even begin?" Grant looked up at her, a hint of determination now in his gaze. "We take control. We expose the truth. The world doesn't need to know the lies we've been living." Her heart skipped. Expose the truth? What truth? Was he talking about their forced marriage? Was he referring to his own role in all of this? "You have to trust me, Lily," Grant said, his voice soft but firm. "This is bigger than your family, bigger than mine. It's about us now, about what we want, not what they tell us we want." Lily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself to make the right choice? And then, just as she was about to respond, a sudden sound broke the tension. The low rumble of a car engine coming up the driveway again. Grant turned his head sharply, his jaw tightening. "We're not alone." Lily looked back toward the gate. Another car had arrived, this one much more familiar. It was her father's car. "No," she whispered under her breath. "Not now. This can't be happening." Grant reached for her arm, his grip gentle but urgent. "Lily, whatever happens, don't let them control you. Remember what I said." Lily nodded, a surge of resolve rising within her. She wasn't sure what was coming next, but one thing was clear. Things were about to change, and no matter what, she wasn't going to let anyone dictate her future anymore. As her father's car came to a stop, Lily took a deep breath. She knew that this moment, this confrontation, would determine everything. What would happen when her father found out that she and Grant were ready to defy the plan? Would the truth be revealed, or would they be swept back into the web of lies? And then, just before the car doors opened, Lily saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure stepping out from the shadows behind the gate. Someone who had been watching them the entire time. Someone who knew everything, and they were here to make sure the truth never came out. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the figure stepping from the shadows. The tall, imposing silhouette moved slowly toward them, the faint light from the driveway casting long shadows. She could barely make out the features of the person, but something about them felt all too familiar. No. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Evan, her father's right-hand man. But more than that, he was someone she had known her whole life, someone who had always been there in the background, manipulating things from the sidelines. Evan had always been the enforcer, the one who made sure things went the family's way, no matter the cost. His presence now, in this moment, felt like the final nail in the coffin. Grant's grip on Lily's arm tightened, his body stiffening beside her. "Who is he?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes narrowing. Lily didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced, trying to piece everything together. Why was Evan here? And why now, when she was trying to take control of her life? As Evan drew closer, she could see the coldness in his eyes, a look she had seen too many times before. The smile on his face was thin, almost sinister. "Evan," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" He stopped a few feet away from them, his gaze flicking between Lily and Grant. "I could ask you the same thing, Lily," he replied, his tone smooth but with an underlying threat. "But I'm sure we both know why you're here." Lily's mind reeled. Had he been sent by her father? Was he here to keep her in line, to stop whatever was happening between her and Grant before it went too far? "I'm not here to play games anymore, Evan," she said, her voice gaining strength despite the fear rising in her chest. "And neither is Grant. Whatever plan you and my father have, it ends tonight." Evan's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. He glanced at Grant with an almost mocking look. "You think you have control, Lily? You think you can just walk away from everything your family has built? Think again." Lily's pulse quickened. Her family. The word stung now. She wasn't sure what was worse, the betrayal of her father, or the fact that Evan, the man who had always been her father's loyal right hand, was now standing in front of her, trying to force her back into a life she no longer wanted. Grant stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're done listening to your threats, Evan. It's over. This whole thing, the marriage, the lies, it ends tonight." For a brief moment, Evan's eyes flickered with something like uncertainty, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You think you can walk away from this unscathed?" he asked, his tone darkening. "You think it's that easy? You're playing in a world you don't understand. Your family isn't going to let you ruin everything over a little love." Lily could feel the weight of Evan's words settling around her like a cloud, suffocating her, but she wasn't about to back down now. Not after everything she'd fought for, not when the truth was finally within her grasp. "We're done," she repeated, her voice stronger this time, "and you can't stop us." Evan took a step back, his smile returning, but this time it was different, twisted. He raised his hand slowly, almost lazily, as if he were dismissing her completely. "You'll regret this," he said softly, his voice carrying a chilling finality. "You can't escape the family, Lily. You can't run from what's been set in motion." And then, just as quickly as he appeared, Evan turned on his heel and walked back toward the gate, vanishing into the shadows once again. Lily stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She didn't know what to think anymore. What did he mean? Grant turned to her, his face unreadable but with a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" Lily swallowed hard, nodding but feeling the tremble in her hands. "I'm fine, but I won't go back to that life. Not after what just happened." Grant stepped closer, his voice low and serious. "We're not going back, Lily, but we have to act fast. Evan's right about one thing. Your father won't let this go. If we don't move now, they'll try to take everything back from us." Lily knew he was right. Evan's visit was a warning, but it wasn't just to her. It was to both of them. The stakes were higher now. If they were going to expose the truth, they had to act quickly, and they couldn't trust anyone. The sound of tires on gravel signaled another car arriving, and this time Lily didn't need to guess who it was. Her father. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Grant turned toward the approaching car, his jaw tightening. "Here we go." Lily swallowed, looking at him, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, she felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had a choice. Their choice. They could face this together, or be torn apart by the forces around them. The car came to a stop, the headlights flashing briefly before it turned off, and in that moment, Lily knew this was the moment that would change everything. The door to her father's car swung open, and Richard Anderson stepped out, his face cold, unreadable. But it wasn't just him. Behind him stood someone Lily hadn't seen in years, someone who had been lost to the shadows of the past. Lily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen her mother in weeks. What was she doing here now? What did she know? "Lily," her father's voice cut through the air like ice. "We need to talk, now." And for the first time, Lily wasn't sure if she could trust the family she'd been fighting to protect. Lily's stomach twisted as she saw her mother step out from the car, her face pale, eyes sharp with something that wasn't quite anger, but something colder, something unfamiliar. The sight of her mother, after everything that had happened, was like a dagger to her heart. It wasn't just that she hadn't seen her in weeks. It was that she had been avoiding this confrontation. The quiet, cold woman who had always seemed to control every situation now looked like she was caught in a storm of her own making. Her father didn't wait for Lily to process the shock. "We're wasting time," he said, his tone colder than Lily had ever heard. He gestured for her to follow him as he walked briskly toward the mansion's grand entrance. Grant's jaw tightened as he looked between Lily and her father, a storm of his own brewing behind his dark eyes. He wasn't one to be intimidated, but Lily could feel the tension mounting as her father led the way. "Come on," Lily whispered to Grant, taking his hand. "We don't have much time." They followed Richard and Evelyn into the house, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. Each step felt like they were walking deeper into a trap. The sound of their shoes echoing in the marble foyer was the only thing breaking the silence as they made their way into the study. Lily could barely breathe as she stepped inside, the space that once felt so familiar now looming like a prison. Her mother took a seat near the fire, her back straight, her eyes unreadable. Richard stood at the window, his back to them, the cold night pouring through the glass. "So, what now?" Lily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Her father turned to face them, his face set in stone. "We do what's necessary," he said, his words sharp and final. "The marriage will proceed, Lily. No more games." Grant stepped forward, his expression hardening. "The marriage? You really think it's going to happen? With everything that's happened?" Richard's gaze darkened. "This family has worked too hard to build its reputation. Everything depends on this marriage, and we will do whatever it takes to make sure it happens, whether you like it or not." Lily could feel the pressure mounting in her chest. Her father's words were not just cold, they were threatening. But there was something else in the air, a flicker of something dangerous. She looked at her mother, who had been silent until now, watching the exchange with an air of finality. Evelyn slowly stood, her gaze never leaving Lily. "It's not just about you, Lily. It never was. You're part of something much bigger than your feelings. You don't have the luxury of choosing." Her words stung, each one sinking deeper into Lily's soul. She wanted to shout, to argue, but she couldn't. The weight of it all, the pressure, the manipulation, the constant pull between loyalty to her family and the truth of her heart, was suffocating. "What do you want from me?" Lily whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't live like this. I can't just pretend. I won't." Her father's expression remained impassive. "You don't have to pretend. You just have to fulfill your part. Marry Grant, keep the family intact, and we'll all be just fine." Lily's heart felt like it was shattering. She had thought for a moment that there might be a way out, a way to take control, but she was trapped by her family's legacy, by their choices, by everything she had ever known. "I'm not a puppet," she finally said, her voice louder now, more defiant. "I refuse to be one anymore." Grant's hand tightened around hers, his support unspoken but real. "She's right. This isn't about manipulation. This is about freedom. And you can't force us into something that doesn't work." Evelyn's eyes flashed with a cold fury. "You don't understand. You never have." She took a step toward Lily, her voice low but full of power. "Do you think we've gotten this far without sacrifice? Without control? Without breaking a few things along the way? You think you can just walk away from all of it?" Lily swallowed hard. Her mother's words burned, but they didn't have the same power over her anymore. "I'm done being controlled. If I have to walk away from this family to find myself, then that's what I'll do." The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Richard's face remained unchanged, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that suggested he wasn't used to this kind of resistance. Evelyn, on the other hand, seemed to freeze, as if she hadn't expected Lily to fight back. Grant stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Lily's right. You can't control everything. You can't force this marriage to happen, not this way." Evelyn turned her icy gaze to him, her eyes narrowing. "You think you can just walk into this family and change everything? You're as much a part of this mess as she is." Lily felt a surge of anger. "This is it. This is where we take a stand." She turned to Grant, her hand squeezing his, and then back to her parents. "No," Lily said, her voice shaking but strong. "We're not going to be part of this anymore. Not your lies, not your manipulation. We're going to tell the truth, all of it." Just as she spoke the words, the door to the study burst open, and a figure stepped into the room. It was Evan, again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, there was another figure, tall and imposing, the last person Lily expected to see. Her sister, Julia. Lily's heart stopped as Julia stepped into the room. Her sister's face was a mix of confusion and anger, eyes wide with disbelief. She looked from Lily to their parents, then to Grant, her gaze flickering with suspicion. "What's going on here?" Julia's voice was cold, sharp, but tinged with uncertainty. She hadn't expected to find herself in the middle of a family confrontation, least of all one involving a marriage she had no idea was still in play. Lily's stomach twisted. She hadn't prepared for this, hadn't anticipated that Julia would be thrust into the chaos of their tangled lives. The fight she had with her father, the sudden confrontation with Grant, all of it seemed to collapse inward as Julia stood there, a living reminder of everything Lily had tried to hide. "You," Lily began, but she couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of everything pressing on her, everything unraveling, was too much. Julia crossed her arms, standing her ground in the doorway. "Why is everyone looking at me like that? What is happening?" Her father sighed heavily, as if this was just another complication in the already complicated mess. "Julia, I think it's time you understood what's been going on," he said, his tone forced but calm. He motioned toward Lily. "Your sister has made her decision. She's going through with the marriage to Grant." Julia's eyes snapped to Lily, and her expression changed in an instant, hurt flashing across her face. You've been married to him? In a coma?" Lily nodded, her throat tight. "I didn't have a choice." Julia looked between Lily and Grant, and the confusion deepened. Her gaze finally landed on their parents, but there was no softening of her expression, no sign of the forgiveness Lily had been hoping for. There was only anger now. "What the hell are you talking about, Mom? Dad? You've known about this? Why didn't you tell me?" Richard's face remained unreadable, but Evelyn finally spoke, her voice cold and measured. "It wasn't your business, Julia. This was always going to be between Lily and us. You don't have to worry about it." Julia's face flushed with indignation. "I don't have to worry. You're making decisions for me, for all of us, without even telling me what's really going on." Lily could feel the room tightening around her. Julia was right. No one had told her the full truth. She hadn't been part of the decision-making. She had been kept in the dark, just like everyone else. And now her sister was seeing this all unfold for the first time, and it was breaking her. "You need to listen to me," Lily said, stepping forward, her voice trembling but determined. "This whole thing, this marriage, everything, is a lie. Our family's been using us as pawns in a game, Julia. I didn't want this. I never wanted this." Julia's eyes searched Lily's face as if trying to see if she was telling the truth. "So what now? What, you just leave everything behind? Walk away from the family?" Her voice cracked, the pain evident. "After everything we've built?" Grant, still standing behind Lily, took a step forward, his expression hard. "Your family hasn't built anything with integrity, Julia. It's been built on control, manipulation, and lies." The tension in the room escalated. The air grew thick, heavy with the weight of truths being spoken for the first time. Julia looked at Grant with disdain, her eyes narrowing. "Who the hell are you to speak about our family like that?" she spat, but then her gaze softened as it flickered back to Lily. "You're really willing to burn everything down for this? For him?" Lily could feel the walls closing in, the pressure building to a breaking point. "I don't want to burn everything down, but I'm not going to keep living a lie, Julia. I can't. Not for them. Not for you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment no one moved. Julia's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she didn't speak. Her gaze moved from Lily to their parents, to Evan, and then back to Lily. It was as if she were searching for the right words, the right response. But she found none. Finally, Julia turned and walked toward the door, but stopped just before leaving. "You don't get it, do you?" she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're choosing him over us." The door clicked shut behind her, and the room fell into a suffocating silence. Lily exhaled sharply, feeling the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. What had she just done? Had she really made the right choice? Was it worth breaking her family apart? Was it worth hurting Julia, hurting everyone? But as she looked at Grant, his eyes filled with a quiet, unwavering resolve, she knew there was no going back. This wasn't just about family anymore. This was about her, about taking control of her own life, her future. Her father broke the silence, his voice cold and final. "You've made your decision, Lily. But understand this. You will regret this." "Then I'll regret it," Lily replied, her voice steady, her heart pounding in her chest. "But I won't live in your shadow anymore. I won't let you control me." Richard's eyes darkened, his jaw clenched. "You'll come crawling back. You all do. It's in your blood." But Lily didn't flinch. She stood taller, feeling for the first time like she wasn't just a piece in someone else's game. "Not this time, Dad. Not this time." Before Richard could respond, the door opened again. This time it wasn't Julia. It was Evan, again. But this time his face was different. He wasn't smirking or calm. His eyes were frantic, a glint of urgency in them. "We have a problem," Evan said, stepping into the room, his tone deadly serious. "It's not just the family anymore. Someone else knows, someone outside the family." Lily's heart raced. Who else? Who could know about their plans, their marriage, their lies? Evan turned to Richard, his voice low. "You need to see this. It's bad." Lily's pulse quickened as Evan's words sank in. Someone else knows. Her mind raced, trying to process the magnitude of what he was saying. This wasn't just about family secrets anymore. This was something bigger, something more dangerous. Grant stepped forward, his body tense, sensing the shift in the room. "What are you talking about, Evan?" His voice was sharp, demanding answers, but Evan didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced at Richard, waiting for some kind of acknowledgement. Richard's expression had darkened further, his posture rigid. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone in the room. He turned toward Lily, his eyes cold, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of fear in them. "Who else knows, Evan?" Lily demanded, her voice firm, trying to take control of the situation. "Who is threatening us now?" Evan took a breath, clearly hesitant before answering. "It's not just someone who knows. They have proof. They've been watching us. Watching you, Lily." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She felt the ground beneath her feet shift. Proof of what? What are you talking about? Evan's gaze flicked to Richard, as if silently asking for permission to explain further. Richard's jaw tightened, and he nodded almost imperceptibly. There's been someone watching us, Lily, Richard said, his voice grim. Someone outside of the family. They know everything about the contract, about your marriage to Grant, and they've been using that information to manipulate our moves. They're threatening to expose it all if we don't play by their rules. Lily felt her chest tighten, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The weight of her father's words hit her like a ton of bricks. Who could be watching them? Who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes? Who is it? Grant asked, his voice strained but full of urgency. Who's behind this? Richard shook his head. I don't know yet, but they've made it clear. If we don't do things their way, they'll expose everything. Your marriage, the family's dealings, the Blackwood-Anderson alliance. It's all at risk. Lily's mind raced. Could it be someone from her father's past? Someone looking to destroy the Anderson family's empire? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone who had their own agenda, their own reason for being involved? Evan's voice broke through her thoughts. They sent a warning, Richard. I intercepted it earlier today. It's not just threats anymore. They're about to make their move, and if we don't act fast, it'll all be exposed. Lily's world tilted on its axis. The walls that had been closing in on her, the family secrets, the marriage, and the lies, they weren't the only threats. There was someone else out there, someone with power and knowledge who was willing to destroy everything to get what they wanted. Whoever they were playing a game with no rules. Grant moved closer to Lily, his hand resting on her shoulder. She could feel the tension in his body, the urgency that mirrored her own. We need to get ahead of this, Lily, he said softly. Whatever this is, we need to expose them before they expose us. Lily nodded, her heart pounding. How do we do that? Evan glanced at her, his face pale. You won't be able to do it alone, Lily. Whoever this is, they're powerful. They have connections we don't even know about. Lily's mind was reeling, her thoughts fragmented. She had never expected her family to be involved in something like this, something so dark, so dangerous. But now she understood. This wasn't just about a forced marriage or Grant's coma. This was about survival. And the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. Then we expose them first, Lily said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. We bring everything into the light. We take control of this situation before they can use it against us. Richard and Evan exchanged a look, one that spoke volumes. They had never expected Lily to be the one to take charge, to push back against the very family that had controlled her for so long. Evan seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then nodded slowly. It's dangerous, Lily. You have no idea how deep this runs. Lily turned to face him, her resolve firm. I don't care how dangerous it is. I'm done being controlled. If they want to play this game, then we'll play it too. Grant stepped beside her, his hand finding hers. We'll do this together. Her father's voice cut through the air, the finality in it unmistakable. You don't understand, Lily. This won't just ruin your family's future, it will destroy everything. You won't get out of this unscathed. Lily's gaze met her father's, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. Maybe it's time everything came crashing down, she said softly, because I won't live in the shadows anymore. As the words left her mouth, the lights in the mansion flickered, then went out entirely. A deep silence followed, broken only by the distant sound of footsteps in the hall, footsteps that didn't belong to anyone in the room. Grant's hand tightened around hers. What was that? He asked, his voice low. Lily's heart skipped a beat. Who else was here? The door to the study creaked open, and in the doorway stood a figure, tall, cloaked in shadows. A figure Lily never thought she'd see again. Her mother. But this time, it wasn't the cold, distant woman she had known. The look in her mother's eyes was full of fear, desperation. "Lily," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "It's worse than you think. They're here." Lily's breath caught in her throat as her mother stepped into the room, her face drawn and pale, her eyes wide with something that resembled fear, something Lily had never seen in her mother before. The silence in the room felt like it stretched on forever as her mother stood in the doorway, her posture rigid, but her body trembling ever so slightly. "They're here," Evelyn whispered again, her voice barely audible but full of urgency. "It's worse than you think." Lily felt a chill run through her. Who was here? Who had arrived unannounced in the middle of the night, when everything already felt like it was unraveling? Grant stepped closer to Lily, his hand still holding hers. His jaw was clenched, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "What's happening, Mom?" Lily asked, her voice steady but her heart racing. She didn't have time for games anymore. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Evelyn's eyes flickered toward Richard, her expression shifting from fear to something darker. Richard stood motionless, his face hard as stone, but Lily could see the tension in his shoulders. Whatever was happening, it had shaken him too. The man who had always controlled everything was now visibly rattled. "They've been watching us," Evelyn finally said, her voice breaking the silence. "I don't know who they are, but they've been watching everything we've done. The contracts, the plans, even Lily. They've been waiting for the right moment to strike." Lily's pulse thundered in her ears. Her mother's words felt like they were drowning her, each syllable adding weight to the already crushing pressure that was closing in on her. Someone was watching them. And if her mother wasn't the one to know who it was, then who? "Who are they?" Grant's voice was sharp, his concern for Lily obvious. Evelyn swallowed hard, her hands clasped together as she seemed to struggle with the truth. "I can't say for sure," she began, "but the only people who would know everything, about Grant, about the marriage, about the contract, are the people who were involved before the accident." She glanced nervously at Richard before continuing. "And if they've come to take control, then nothing you or I do will matter anymore." Lily's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Before the accident. People who were involved before. Could her mother mean the Blackwoods? Or was it someone else entirely? "Then we have to do something," Grant said, stepping forward, his voice filled with determination. "We can't let them control this anymore." But Evelyn shook her head, her eyes filled with a helplessness that Lily had never seen before. "It's already too late, Grant. They're here, they've been here, and they're not going to leave until they've destroyed everything." The room seemed to close in on them, the tension thick in the air. Lily could feel the walls around her, the mansion, the life she had known, starting to crumble. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized the full scope of what was happening. Who were these people? What did they want? And more importantly, what were they going to do to her, to her family, to Grant? A sound interrupted her spiraling thoughts. The sound of a door creaking open somewhere down the hall, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps. Lily turned her head sharply, her eyes locking with Grant's. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Grant's hand tightened around hers, his face filled with concern. "We're not alone." And then, before anyone could react, the study door swung open completely, and another figure stepped into the room. Lily's heart froze as she saw who it was. A tall man, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a black mask. He held something in his hand, a file, thick with papers, that seemed far too important to ignore. Lily's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a threat anymore, it was an ultimatum. "Good evening, Miss Anderson," the man said, his voice cold, controlled, but with an undertone of menace. "I hope we're not interrupting anything important." The man stepped further into the room, his mask hiding any trace of emotion. As he placed the file on the desk with a thud, he looked directly at Lily, his gaze unwavering. "You've made quite a mess, Miss Anderson," he continued, his words sharp, deliberate. "And it's time for the truth to come out." Lily's heart skipped a beat, panic flooding her chest. What truth? What does he know? Grant stepped protectively in front of her, but the man didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled behind the mask, a cold, empty smile. "You can either play our game," he said, "or we can make sure your family's legacy ends right here." And with that, he stepped back toward the door, leaving them with only the ominous weight of his words hanging in the air. Lily's mind reeled, unable to fully process what was happening, but one thing was clear. They were no longer just fighting her family's control. They were fighting someone else's war. The stakes had just gotten a lot higher. Lily's chest tightened as she stood frozen, her gaze locked on the man in the mask. Every word he spoke seemed to slice through the silence like a blade. She could feel the air in the room becoming thicker, more suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Grant stood in front of her, his posture rigid, but his jaw clenched in a way that told Lily he was just as unsettled as she was. The man's words, cold and final, reverberated in her mind. "You can either play our game, or we can make sure your family's legacy ends right here." The man's cold smile was a mask of control. He knew something, knew things Lily couldn't begin to comprehend. But what was this game, and who was he working for? "Who are you?" Lily managed to say, her voice shaky but trying to stay firm. "What do you want?" The masked figure looked at her, his eyes hidden, but the movement of his head indicating he was sizing her up. "What we want, Miss Anderson, is simple. We want control over the situation. You see, your family has a habit of making deals with the wrong people, and now we're here to make sure those deals don't fall apart." Lily's heart sank. Deals with the wrong people? "What does that even mean?" she demanded, stepping forward, though her legs felt weak. "You're just some mercenary or hired hand sent to intimidate us?" The masked man chuckled softly, and the sound sent a chill down her spine. "You misunderstand, Miss Anderson. We don't intimidate people. We give them choices, and you have two very distinct choices ahead of you." He reached over and picked up the thick file from the desk, holding it up for her to see. The weight of it felt oppressive, as if it carried with it all the secrets, lies, and manipulation of the Anderson family's empire. "Your family has a lot to lose, Miss Anderson," the man said, his voice lowering to a more menacing tone. "And we have the evidence to make sure everything you've worked for, everything your father has worked for, goes up in smoke. We could ruin you all. But there's a way out." Lily's head swam, the room spinning as her father's shadow loomed behind her. She turned to look at him, but he didn't move. He didn't speak. It was as if he was waiting for someone else to make a decision for him, just like always. "What is it you want, then?" Grant's voice cut through the silence, steady but laced with anger. "What kind of game are you playing with us?" The masked man looked at Grant for the first time, his gaze sharp and calculating. "It's simple, Mr. Blackwood. You and Miss Anderson will do exactly what we tell you to do. You will comply with our terms, and in return, we'll let you keep your family's wealth. You'll keep your power, you'll get your happy ending." Lily's mind raced. This is a game of control, she realized. Whoever these people are, they don't want to just ruin my family. They want to own it. Her father's voice broke the tension, cold and resigned. "What are your terms?" The man turned to Richard, his eyes still unreadable. "Your daughter will stay married to Grant. You will maintain the marriage, and we'll ensure that the Blackwood-Anderson union remains intact. We'll make sure that everything is kept quiet. But there's one condition. You'll let us control the business dealings. All of them." Lily felt her throat tighten. "Control the business dealings? What?" she breathed, stepping back. "You're threatening to take over everything? The family business? My father's legacy?" The man's smile was almost too calm. "Not threatening, Miss Anderson. Guaranteeing." Lily's mind spun, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite solve falling into place. They weren't just trying to destroy her family. They were trying to take everything. The wealth, the power, the influence. Grant was already beside her, his voice low. "You're not going to get away with this. We won't let you ruin everything for the sake of control." The masked figure cocked his head, his voice chillingly casual. "It's not about what you want, Mr. Blackwood. It's about what we need. And if you don't play along, you'll find that we're not the ones who'll lose here." The masked man took a step back, as if the conversation was already over. His eyes moved toward the door, signaling to someone outside the room. "I'll give you time to think," he said, his voice cold. "But don't take too long. We'll be waiting." With that, he turned and walked toward the door, opening it just enough to let another figure, another man, tall and ominous, step in. The door closed quietly behind him. "Remember, Miss Anderson," the masked man called over his shoulder as he left, "your family's future, and your sister's future, depend on the decisions you make." The door clicked shut, leaving Lily and Grant in the stunned silence of the study, the weight of their new reality sinking in. Lily turned to her father, eyes wide with disbelief. What just happened? Who are they? What do they want? Richard's face was grim, but there was something else lurking in his eyes. Fear. The first real sign that the man who had controlled everything for so long had finally met something or someone he couldn't handle. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "They're not just anyone, Lily. They're connected to people I've wronged." Lily's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Richard looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "You need to know the truth. Everything we've built, everything we've done, it's been to protect you. But now we're in deeper than I ever imagined." Lily's heart raced as her father's words sank in. Deeper than he ever imagined. What could he possibly mean by that? The chilling implications of his admission hit her like a tidal wave. All this time, her father had been hiding secrets that had led them to this moment. "Deeper than you imagined," Lily repeated, her voice trembling. "What does that even mean, Dad? Who are these people?" Richard's face hardened, his eyes dark with something she hadn't seen before. Guilt. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but hesitated, struggling to find the words. Grant, standing beside Lily, shot him a sharp look, sensing the gravity of the situation. He had always known there was more to the family's power and influence, but he hadn't expected this. "They're connected to my past," Richard finally said, his voice low, barely above a whisper. "People I crossed years ago, people who never forget, or forgive." Lily's stomach churned. The idea that her family's wealth, their empire, was built on more than just hard work, that it was built on the backs of people they had betrayed, manipulated, or wronged, was too much to bear. She had always admired her father for his ambition, his drive, but now she saw him for what he really was, someone who had sacrificed integrity for power. "Who are they?" she asked again, her voice sharp with urgency. "Who's behind all of this?" Richard swallowed hard, the weight of the question pressing down on him. He took a slow step toward the window, his back turned to them, as if he couldn't bear to face Lily or Grant. "You don't need to know everything, Lily. Trust me, it's better this way. If you get involved, you'll only make things worse." Lily's frustration flared. "Worse? You've already dragged me into this mess. You've destroyed everything I thought was real. My sister, Grant, me. We're all part of your games now, Dad, so stop hiding the truth from me." Richard turned around, his eyes dark and heavy with regret. "You're right. I should have told you long ago, but I didn't want to drag you into it. I promised your mother before everything changed that you would never be involved. I couldn't keep that promise anymore." Lily stepped closer, her mind racing. "Why didn't you just walk away? Why keep up the charade?" Richard clenched his fists, his face hardening with a familiar resolve. "I did what I had to do to protect this family, to protect you. You wouldn't understand. None of you would. These people we've crossed, they don't let you leave without paying a price. They own us. They've owned us from the very beginning, and now they're ready to collect." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Lily felt her knees go weak. Her entire life, everything she had known, had been built on lies, on debts and deals, with people she had no knowledge of. And now these faceless figures were coming to collect, coming for her. "Who are they, Dad?" Grant asked again, his voice calm but full of authority. "What do they want with Lily?" Richard finally seemed to break under the pressure, the coldness in his eyes giving way to the vulnerability he had hidden for so long. "They want what they've always wanted, control. They want power, influence, and they want Lily to be their pawn." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She was the pawn in their game. Everything she had done, every choice she'd made, had been orchestrated by people she hadn't even known existed, people who were now waiting for her to make the wrong move. Grant's voice cut through the silence. "No, not anymore. We won't be anyone's pawn. We will take control." Lily looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and fear. He was right. She couldn't keep playing the victim in this game. It was time to take action, time to stop running. But just as the thought settled in her mind, another sound interrupted their conversation, footsteps approaching from the hall. Lily's heart skipped a beat as the door creaked open, and standing in the doorway was someone she didn't expect to see. Julia. Her sister looked disheveled, her face flushed with emotion, but there was a look of determination in her eyes, one that had replaced the confusion from earlier. She had obviously overheard everything. "You think you're the only one who's been dragged into this?" Julia's voice was sharp, her words laced with anger. "You think this is only about you, Lily?" Lily stared at her sister, her mouth dry. "What are you talking about?" Julia stepped further into the room, her eyes narrowing with an intensity Lily hadn't seen before. "I know who's behind all of this, and I know what they've done. It's not just Dad you need to worry about, it's everyone you've ever trusted." Lily felt the ground shift beneath her. Her heart raced again, and she found herself at a loss for words. "What do you mean?" Julia exhaled sharply, her eyes burning with a mixture of frustration and a deep-seated knowledge that made Lily uneasy. "They've been pulling the strings the whole time, and you are their pawn, whether you like it or not." Lily's head spun. "Who are you talking about, Julia?" Julia looked at their father for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to speak further. Finally, she turned back to Lily, her voice low but full of venom. "The Blackwood family," Julia spat. "They've been controlling you, controlling everything. This was never about love, Lily. It was always about power." Lily stood frozen, her mind struggling to comprehend what Julia had just said. The Blackwood family? The very family that had already tangled their lives into this web of lies had more control over them than she ever realized. And then, as if the weight of the revelation wasn't enough, another sound interrupted the moment, a muffled knock from the study door, followed by the unmistakable voice of Evan. "We need to talk," he said, his voice laced with urgency. "This isn't over yet." Lily's blood ran cold as the door creaked open, and a new player in the game stepped into the room, one she hadn't expected. The one person who could change everything. Her mother. Lily's heart raced as she turned toward the door, and her stomach twisted in an instant. Her mother stood in the doorway, her face pale, her posture rigid with the weight of something unspoken. This was no longer a family confrontation. This was a breaking point. Her mother's eyes, usually so cold and distant, were now filled with a deep, uneasy tension. Evelyn. The woman who had stood by silently as her father pulled every string, made every decision, now stood at the threshold of the truth, like a ghost returning to the scene of the crime. Lily felt the world shift. She had been trying so hard to understand her family's betrayal, trying to piece together the secrets that had torn her life apart. And now, it seemed like her mother, the woman who had always been the silent partner to her father's schemes, was the one who could either confirm or destroy everything. Evelyn stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. She met Lily's gaze, and for a brief moment, There was a flicker of recognition, a shared history. But then her eyes hardened, and she spoke. "You've made a mess of things, Lily," Evelyn said, her voice low, almost detached. "Everything you've worked for, everything we've worked for, and now it's all falling apart." Lily's breath caught. Falling apart? Was this all a game to her mother? Was that all her family had cared about? Preserving the empire, the power, no matter who had to be sacrificed in the process? "I didn't make this mess," Lily said, her voice breaking. "You did, Mom. Dad did. You're the ones who sold us out. You're the ones who let them control us." Her mother's face faltered for a moment. There was something there, a flicker of regret, or maybe guilt. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold mask Lily had grown up with. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice now quieter, more intimate. "I did what I thought was best. You wouldn't understand, Lily. This isn't about love. It never was. It's about power. And we, the Andersons, needed to stay on top. I did what I had to do to protect you, to protect this family." Grant moved beside Lily, his hand finding hers. He looked at Evelyn with quiet fury, but his voice was controlled. "You've never protected her. You've suffocated her. And now you're asking her to just give in and play along? After everything that's happened? No, this ends tonight." Lily felt a surge of strength as Grant's words sank in. She was done. She was done with the lies, done with being manipulated, done with being the family pawn. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling but strong, "this isn't about protecting me anymore. You've been protecting yourself, and you're willing to throw me under the bus for it. But I won't let you." Evelyn's expression hardened. She took a step back, eyes narrowing, as if she were considering her next move. "You don't have a choice, Lily. You can't leave this family. You'll ruin everything. They will ruin everything, and you'll regret it. You're too far in." Lily felt the cold weight of her mother's words, but she refused to let them break her. "I don't have to be a part of this anymore," Lily said, her voice rising with newfound defiance. "I'm not going to play this game. I'm not going to let you or anyone else control me." Her mother stared at her for a long moment, as if searching for the girl she had once known, the obedient daughter, the one who had always done as told. But that girl was gone. In her place stood someone who wasn't afraid to fight back, someone who would no longer be a part of their game. There was a long silence, but then Evelyn's face shifted. It wasn't anger or frustration that showed now. It was something else, something more tragic. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Then I suppose this is the end of it all." Lily swallowed hard, her heart heavy with everything that had come before. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It is." Her mother turned to leave, but stopped just before the door. She glanced over her shoulder, her face softer now, almost weary. "I hope you're ready for the consequences, Lily. I hope you know what you're doing." Lily nodded, her eyes never leaving her mother. "I'll face whatever comes, Mom. I will choose what happens next." As her mother walked out of the room, the silence that followed was deafening, but Lily felt something inside of her shift, a weight lifting, a new sense of freedom she hadn't known she could have. Grant moved closer to her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "We'll get through this," he said softly. "Together." Lily looked up at him, her heart swelling with the truth of his words. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about choosing her own path, taking control of her future. And she wasn't going to let anyone, family, threats, or anything else, take that away from her. As the door clicked shut behind her mother, and the weight of everything finally seemed to settle, Lily took a deep breath. She wasn't afraid anymore. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was ready to win. And so the story of Lily Anderson, once a pawn in her family's game, began a new chapter. One where she was the one holding the pen, and the world would finally see her story on her terms.